Today, we're diving into a fascinating medical mystery. What if I told you that three of the biggest health challenges we face, diabetes, liver disease, and even Alzheimer's, aren't separate enemies, but actually part of the same connected problem? We're going to uncover a brand new unified theory that's changing everything we thought we knew. So let's start with the central puzzle. Have you ever wondered why these three conditions so often show up in the same person? It's definitely not a coincidence. As we're about to see, they're not really three different problems, but more like different symptoms of one single, underlying breakdown in the body. All right, let's get into it. The latest science is showing us that these diseases are really just points on a continuous spectrum, and they're all linked by a single molecular culprit that quietly goes to work damaging some of our most vital organs. Now, we've all heard that sugar is the bad guy, right? And look, it definitely plays a part. But our investigation today points to a much more specific villain. The real mastermind behind this whole crisis is a toxic overload of a particular kind of fat. It's a phenomenon called lipotoxicity. Our investigation is going to start at the first crime scene, the pancreas. You can think of this organ as the body's control tower for metabolism. It's what regulates our blood sugar. But, as we'll find out, it's incredibly vulnerable to this fatty assault. So what exactly is lipotoxicity? It sounds complex, but the idea is pretty simple. It's the damage and even the death of our cells when they get flooded with specific harmful fats. It's almost like a slow-motion poisoning happening at a microscopic level. But here's a really critical point. Not all fats are the bad guys here. The research is super clear on this. Certain saturated fats are highly toxic to our cells. But then you have other fats, like monounsaturated fats, that can actually be protective and help fight off the damage. So it's the type of fat that really matters. Okay, so how does this cellular poisoning actually play out? Well, inside the pancreas, these toxic fats set off a fatal domino effect. First, they stress out the cell's protein factory. That kicks off a destructive chain reaction of signals that ultimately ramps up an enzyme that destroys a crucial survival molecule. The final result? The very cells that produce our insulin start to die off. And it gets even worse. This damage creates this self-perpetuating, vicious cycle. The initial fat overload causes what's called oxidative stress. You can think of it like cellular rust. This rust starts to damage the cell's protein factory. And here's the kicker. A damaged factory then starts to produce even more rust. This feedback loop just keeps going, accelerating the destruction of the pancreas's ability to make insulin, and that right there sets the stage for type 2 diabetes. Okay, let's move on to the next crime scene, the liver. Since it's the central hub for processing all the fats in our body, it's the next organ to really feel the pressure when the system gets overloaded. Now, a stressed out fatty liver doesn't just suffer in silence. Oh no, it starts broadcasting these harmful signals all throughout the body. These signals are called hepatokines, and they're basically like bad intel that messes up metabolism everywhere else, making the entire problem so much worse. And this right here illustrates a huge breakthrough. For years, the only way to know how bad the liver damage was to do an invasive biopsy. But now, by tracking these very signals in the blood, we can diagnose the severity of liver disease with incredible accuracy. These specific markers can tell doctors exactly what's going on inside the liver, no biopsy required. It's a game changer. Our investigation now brings us to our final and maybe the most surprising location, the brain. You know, we don't usually think of the brain as a metabolic organ, but it turns out it's extremely vulnerable when the body's systems start to fail. And this is a massive paradigm shift. Researchers are now actually redefining Alzheimer's as a metabolic disease. In fact, some have started calling it type 3 diabetes. Why? Because it involves insulin resistance, not in the body, but in the brain itself, which literally starves neurons of the energy they need to function and survive. Of course, the brain has its own defense systems, and a key guardian is good cholesterol, or HDL. HDL is crucial. It helps maintain the blood-brain barrier, it fights inflammation, and it helps clear out those toxic proteins linked to Alzheimer's. But when our overall metabolism is broken, this absolutely vital defense system gets compromised. Okay, so we've got our clues from the pancreas, the liver, and the brain. Now it's time to connect all the dots and finally reveal the full network that's behind this metabolic crime. First up, we have the liver-brain axis. Those toxic signals we just talked about, the hepatokines, they travel from a fatty liver straight up to the brain. Once there, they can cross that weakened blood-brain barrier and trigger inflammation, which we know is a key driver of cognitive decline. Next, there's the pancreas-brain axis. You see, insulin isn't just about blood sugar. In the brain, it's a vital signal for memory and neuron health. So when the brain becomes insulin resistant, it's like it can no longer hear this crucial protective message coming from the pancreas. And finally, to complete the triangle, we have the pancreas-liver axis. I mean, these two organs are in constant, direct communication. Dysfunction in one immediately starts triggering problems in the other, and this locks them both into a dangerous downward spiral. So the crucial takeaway here is that this isn't just one thing going wrong. It's a whole cascade. And scientists now have a name for this unified theory that really hits the nail on the head: multi-hit metabolic toxicity. This theory breaks down the whole process into 4 distinct hits. First, you get a flood of toxic fats into the system. Second, this overloads the liver, which starts sending out those distress signals. Third, those signals contribute to the failure of the pancreas. And finally, fourth, this entire toxic combination leads to a breakdown in the brain. But here's the really hopeful part. Understanding this unified network isn't just an academic exercise. It's unlocking a whole new era of treatment. Instead of just fighting one disease at a time, we can now start to target the entire network. So what does this actually look like in the real world? We are seeing some incredible next-generation therapies emerge. Some of these new drugs are what they call triple agonists, meaning they hit targets in the pancreas, the liver, and the brain all at once. Others specifically go after the liver's metabolism, while brand new technologies are being designed to shuttle treatments directly into the brain. It's a multi-pronged attack for a multi-system disease. And this leaves us with a final and pretty profound thought. If these aren't 3 separate diseases, but really just one interconnected metabolic failure, could we be on the verge of a single therapy that could treat or maybe even prevent all 3 at the same time? The science we're seeing emerge suggests the answer could very well be yes.